Hall of Famer Tito Santana, hoping to give.
Hello, hey guys, just 10 here with your 5 wrestling. What's your opinion?
And something like that than I have ever found.
That's right, guys. Welcome to another special Tanadian edition of Till 5 Wrestling. I am Till 5 Tan. This is Bret the Hitman Hart. And ladies and gentlemen,
I'm the notorious ATB. And since Tan, is stuck on an island of irrelevancy, we're going to make him try and make Bret Hart relevant tonight. With 5 segments. This is technically a reshoot, but, we're just going to go ahead and do it.
That's right. Now sponsored by Stover's Liquidation.
Yes. Went ahead and changed our background. If we're going to split screen, we're going to give Stovers all the exposure they can get.
That's right.
Now, somebody who didn't have a lot of exposure when he started was our topic. And when he started, Tan, I believe he started in the Stampede.
That's right. He did, Aaron. As you know, he started his career as a referee in his father's promotion, Stampede Wrestling, in 1976. And by 78, he would become a wrestler. It was the Hart thing to do. That's what they were all going to do. And during that time, he accumulated every title that they had to offer. I mean, come on.
I mean, nepotism title reigns count too.
Right. And he did that with all his sons, if you look back at that historically. But anywho, so it was also during this time, though, that he really started to work that technical style, and he started getting some love in New Japan, started working some New Japan matches. And he was starting to really hone in the Bret Hart that we would come to know a little later while he was there in Japan.
Okay, but this is all, I read Bret's book, but that's been several drinks and lifetimes and cigarettes and other smokables and edibles ago. So I can't remember all those facts, but I can say
they didn't book him prominently at all. Like he was a young boy basically.
Yeah, and he needed kind of some improvement. Now,
but he does credit that to really.
Yeah, it was working from the ground. It was the flooring for what would be Bret's great career.
Whoa. Well,
if you're in the need of some flooring, like the recent truckload they got for, I believe it was $1.60 per square foot. I don't remember how it was done. I just saw it on their Facebook. I know that they got some really good flooring deals in recently. But if you need some flooring or other home improvement, home remodeling stuff, go talk to our current sponsor, Stover's Liquidation. They are open 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. They're available 24 hours online at www.stoversliquidation.com. They are closed on Sunday.
And Aaron, if you're in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, you can find them at 481 Tulsa Road, or you can give them a call at 865-523-4449. Or if you're in Cookeville, Tennessee, you can give them a call at 931-526-2591, or you can visit them at 452 West Broad Street. Tell them Till 5 sent you.
That's right. And speaking of being sent, Bret got sent to the big time by his dad.
So, well, basically what happened is that in 1984, Stampede Wrestling was acquired by the World Wrestling Federation in their march to take down all the territories. Excuse me.
Because Vince McMahon liked to try and kill all the territories.
And as that promotion's most successful performer, Bret was one of the few taken to the World Wrestling Federation with the acquisition. And he would wrestle there in 1984. He would adopt the nickname The Hitman and begin teaming with brother-in-law Jim Neidhart there in 85.
Man,
the Hart Foundation.
By Jimmy.
Yep.
Mouth of the
No
South
relation.
Park. Yeah.
No relation, but still perfect at the time.
The trademark sunglasses were given to him because he couldn't not make eye contact with the camera.
Yep. And
so
his
that was
technical ability during his early days gave him the nickname from Gorilla Monsoon, the excellence of execution. But as you know, Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just saying, Bret. He stayed tag teams for most of that
That's
from
what
the
I was gonna say.
'80s.
Right.
Him and Anvil were a dominant tag team, and then Bret. Do you remember the reason they split?
So I'm
putting you
trying
on the
to think
spot here.
I remember they had the feud with the British Bulldogs because that was one of their most notable feuds that they had going on during that time.
Or was it just a decision that was made?
Vince.
I feel like that was probably.
I don't remember a breakup angle.
This was probably before Vince really pushed those hard.
So I would imagine that they just kind of. Because I'm not mistaken, Jim Neidhart, during that time, he started jobbing around and he became like Who, and then he would team with Owen a little later.
Yeah, he had the new foundation with Owen and all that. But anywho.
Yeah, anywho.
Bret would go into singles career and started really getting his push with beating Perfect at SummerSlam.
Yeah, so that was really big. His first real prominent singles feud was with Ricky Steamboat, but he really got to showcase what he could do with Kurt Hennig. I mean, because Kurt is just the most perfect wrestler that ever lived.
Bret, to compare it to modern day, a Dolph Ziggler is a Kurt Hennig. Like, just that is
excellent. One of the best hands you could possibly ask for. Will do anything for the show.
Not necessarily known for his main event runs, but he made everybody look like $1 million.
And put on a damn good match, whether it was first or last.
Yeah, it was always a clinic.
Yep.
So,
and from there, the same year in 1991, Bret also won King of the Ring. Okay. And then he would start one of my favorite Bret solo feuds with the Mountie from there. The Bret and the Mountie. You get fun with that. And from there, he would eventually win his second Intercontinental title from Piper, I believe.
Yes, I remember watching that.
What was that, WrestleMania? Let's see. It was 1992, so that would have been WrestleMania. I don't know. That's okay, though.
6
or 7, maybe. Yeah.
But I remember the Royal Rumble. This would have been Bret was supposed to face the Mountie, but Bret had the flu, so yeah, Piper did, and then that led to Piper winning the Intercontinental title, and then they had their rematch at WrestleMania.
Great match, by the way, as usual. Piper and Bret, really great. Well, and from there, this is something that a lot of people don't know because WWE actually does not credit this, but it also in 1992 at a Wrestling Challenge taping, he would defeat Shawn Michaels in the first ever WWF ladder match.
Well, look, that never happened, okay?
It did. There's footage now. There's footage. It was a myth for a long time, but it's real. But it only gets bigger from there for Bret. Because also in 1992, he would win his first WWF championship, defeating Nature Boy Ric Flair.
At Rampage, or Invasion 92.
At AEW Rampage.
No, they had a Rampage in 92.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
All right, come on.
All right. So he had that great match with Flair, and he would defend against a lot of people during that time. Eventually, he'd drop it to Yoke.
Well, this is Bret's kind of trial run as a world champion. Yep. He is given the spot, and then Hogan decides, well, no, brother, I need it before I leave off for Hollywood. And then when Hogan still leaves, and Yoko's got the belt, it comes time that we need
the hero we deserve.
And that is what Bret Hart really was in the late 90s.
That's right. So it continued a little bit. And before we get there, we got to touch on his feud with Owen. At least. Yes. So the feud with Owen, it was just a brotherly rival for a long time. Bret would not compete against Owen in a one-on-one match.
Well, that's because Bret hogged the spotlight. And he wouldn't give his little brother a chance. And then it was all because of his brother that he didn't become a tag team champion.
That's right.
Because Bret's too selfish.
There you go. That's what you think. But
that's the way it is with older siblings.
We will get to the hero we deserve now. Right? And the hero we deserve, the hero that you guys deserve, the hero that I have. Because as a Canadian citizen, Bret Hart is in my heart. Now, that being said...
Oh, Canada. That being said...
So, in 96 is really where it starts kicking off for Bret. As far as just storyline-wise. The matches were great.
You start getting an attitude change in wrestling fans. On the other side of things... On the other side of the wrestling world, you have Hulk Hogan becomes Hollywood. The NWO starts taking over at this same time. On WWF, Bret's still a cookie cutter good guy. And this jerk, Stone Cold Steve Austin, who's mocking the Bible at his King of the Ring win, is going after Bret, who's been nothing but a nice guy.
And that's basically the gist of that early days for Steve Austin.
The fans started turning.
Yep.
So
I agree.
Bret was never the bad guy. He was the hero that we deserved.
The anti-hero.
Yeah.
Bret Hart.
You know, just think of how nice the matches and the showcases could have been if we hadn't had DX running around. We had had Canadians like Bret and Owen and the Bulldog. Just saying. They would have made the world.
Is an honorary Canadian, but of course is British, hence the name British Bulldog.
Well, he's part of the Hart Foundation, is my
point.
That left when Bret did.
Well, there was a lot of great Canadian workers on the roster at that point. Let us not forget Can-Am Express, man. Those guys were some talented guys. I know they were not prominent in WWF, but they were there during that era.
Doug Furnas and Philip LaFawn.
That's right.
Yeah. What is their other names?
Doug Furnas and Dan Crawford.
Yeah, whoever Dan Crawford is, that's Philip LaFawn.
That's Philip LaFawn. Yeah, it's the same guy.
Yeah. You had them. You had... Who else did you have?
As far as Canadians during that
time?
You
were the one that was like all the Canadian wrestlers.
Can-Am Express, you had Hart, you had all the Harts, you had Jim the Anvil still running around, you had, that was the problem. That was the problem. They weren't letting these Canadians come and run rampant. God forbid if they were all Samoan.
We would have pushed them all. Everybody would have had a world title run and main event at WrestleMania.
This is criminal.
Yeah. Talk about not getting to finish a story. Bret didn't get to finish his WrestleMania story because Bret because Shawn lost his smile. And Bret didn't get to have that WrestleMania rematch.
That is a true hero.
I feel your pain, sir.
True hero, Bret. Now, let's get back into the career.
Sorry.
We veered off there for a sec.
It's what we do. We're not setting together for this, so we can't keep each other on course as easily with a look.
Yeah. So we're going off on tangents, if you will. But so during this era, we touched on the feud of Steve Austin. Okay. This is at the tip of Steve Austin catching fire, as we know. You talked about it a little bit already. They would go on to feud, and also during that time, he defeated Austin at Survivor Series in 96. Yep.
With a really sweet reversal of the $1 Million Dream. I will never forget that. Kicking into the back corner.
Number one contender for the WWF Championship held by Psycho Sid.
Yes.
So Hart challenged Sid at In Your House 12, It's Time. And Shawn Michaels was serving as a guest commentator at ringside and accidentally cost Bret Hart the match because he was fooling around with Sid during that time.
Yeah.
So this really...
You get to the Royal Rumble.
Right.
You've got Sid and Shawn in a rematch. Shawn wins the belt back by cheating.
Yep.
And then in the Royal Rumble, you have Vader and The Undertaker. You have Bret Hart You have Stone Cold Steve Austin and what was it? Fake Diesel, maybe? There was one other person, but Bret eliminates Stone Cold. The fans or the referees are all distracted. Stone Cold slides back in and dumps out because Bret thought he had won.
Yeah.
And instead, he comes in, dumps out Vader and The Undertaker, dumps out Bret, and fake wins the Royal Rumble that should have been Bret's.
It really should have.
To screw him over yet again. Then in December, we get to Fatal 4-Way that was supposed to be determining the opponent for Shawn at WrestleMania. But Shawn lost his smile on a Thursday night Raw beforehand. Yep. So it ended up being a 4-way match for the title. Bret wins. What was that, his third?
Yeah, that would have been his third.
His third world title in your house in February instead of at WrestleMania, where, let's be honest, Bret should have. It
should have been.
Yeah. So you get that match, and then the next night, Bret loses in the steel cage.
Yeah, they listen, man. Bret was a workhorse for WWE, for WWF, WWE, whatever you want to call it, for a long time. Okay, and I know they gave him belts, but I'm not judging success on assets when it comes to that. They should have done more right by Bret during this time.
Well, giving you a title belt is a way of saying thank you.
Right.
Letting you hold the title belt is a way of saying I mean it.
Right.
And they never did that for Bret like they should have.
No. And they didn't. And because during this era, the Hart Foundation would begin, as we know. Okay, and that would be Owen, Bulldog, Jim, Brian Pillman for some reason, and Bret Hart. Brian Pillman apparently trained at the Hart Dungeon, if I'm not mistaken, is how
and I think that it was easier to just not worry about because of the Austin rivalry at the time.
And it worked on screen. Yeah. Like, I was totally cool with that. But anywho, we're going to say that a lot tonight. That's put an anywho count up on the screen. Drink every time I say anywho. So the Hart Foundation was great, man. And the heel work that they did during that time was off the charts. Bret, during that run, should have been a champion for a long time. Thank you. Chicks hate Rush, actually. They hate it. But I love Rush.
Anyways. So. Anywho. So, Bret ends up getting royally screwed over with all their shenanigans over and over, left and right. And then we get the Montreal Screwjob. We get that build of the Hart Foundation. We get that Montreal Screwjob. Bret ends up getting kicked to the curb. And it's like Bret has to kind of rebuild his career at this point and rebuild his hope for wrestling.
Well, that's insane for me because, during that time, Vince was actively like, yeah, Bret, maybe you should start talking to WCW. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, go over there. I'm not going to be mad at you, Bret.
Yeah. He was always
Vince
was leading him on. Vince was a dirtbag. Let's be honest, folks.
Sorry about that. Had to open the door so the dogs didn't scratch it down.
Fair enough.
But yeah, Vince was an absolute dirtbag.
Yeah,
absolutely.
To Bret. I feel like at least that Vince was a dirtbag to Bret. We have to paraphrase things like that nowadays.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like Vince was a dirtbag.
Yeah. Yeah, this is all opinion based. It's
not
like people forget that about the internet nowadays.
Yeah.
But Bret leaves. It's time to rebuild. And if you're needing to rebuild a certain part of your home, you might want to go see our friends at Stover's Liquidation. Located at 481 Tulsa Road, Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Tam, what's that phone number?
That phone number is 865-523-4449.
They are open 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. They're closed on Sundays, just like the Cookeville location that is located at 452 West Broad Street in Cookeville, Tennessee. You could contact them at
931-526-2591.
That is Stover's Liquidation. You can also find them at www.stoversliquidation.com. They have liquidation and wholesale home improvement specialty products available, and they have truckload quantities. So just contact them, see what deals they've got going on for what home improvement you have going on, and they will hook you up. Tell them that Till 5 sent you.
That's right. Don't forget that part. Oh no, we're getting to my darkest days here, guys.
The dark parts of Bret Hart's career, if you look closely, if you're watching this and not listening, you will see the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship, because at this point, Bret has gone to WCW.
That's right. What a moment, really. You know, a lot of fans at the time never thought that that would actually happen. When the Montreal Screwjob happened and he's standing in the ring, and at the end of it, he spells out WCW into the camera, dude. That was some big stuff. But sure enough, Bret does go to WCW. And it starts off pretty hot. He would become associates of the NWO because he's an ex-WWF guy, so he has to be in the NWO.
Yeah, the worst fast count ref screw job in wrestling history is how Bret gets brought in. First off, Bret, you get the best wrestler available, and you have him debut as a referee?
Arguably in his prime.
Bro. Come on, bro.
That's hornyacker stuff right there.
That is some real hornyaka stuff. They did Bret so wrong.
It's because of you, Vince Russo, really, partially. If you really, because that's why I said hornyacker, because of you, Vince Russo.
Yeah.
Just letting you know.
It's all your fault, bro.
Thanks, Vince.
Yeah, bro. You had Bret Hart come in and just basically get completely wasted. I can't tell you much that Bret did that was relevant of WCW, and I watch WCW every week. I know Bret had really good matches. Bret Hart and Booker T, Bret Hart and Chris Benoit.
The only notable thing for me outside of the horrific incident we're going to talk about momentarily, I like his work that he did with DDP when they were flip-flopping the U.S. title. I like some of that.
Bret, and that's why I went with the U.S. title instead of this NWO World title reign.
Right.
Let's face it, Bret with the U.S. title was one of the best U.S. champions they ever had.
Absolutely. And a great decision.
Yeah. And it was a worker's belt, and that's where Bret belonged.
And once again, during that time, he had another match with Piper where he would lose the United States Championship to Piper. Almost poetic, you know, defeating Piper for the IC title, dropping the U.S. title to Piper.
Well, you had, first off, I hated these new round glasses that they had him wearing. Interesting. I mean, yeah.
Like Ozzy Osbourne was jacked.
Well, and from there you get he joins the NWO. He has a rivalry with Terry Funk. He ends up winning the tag team titles in WCW alongside Goldberg and like Sting and the Giant. Like they passed the belts around. It was honestly the worst part of my wrestling enjoyment was Bret Hart's time in WCW, because they treated it like a fever dream.
WCW closed for a reason.
Well,
we all loved it.
They didn't have somebody to guide that ship.
Exactly.
And every time they changed who was in charge, Bret got shifted to a new spot. And then you add on to that the death of Owen. And Bret kind of emotionally checks out for a while.
And out of that, at least came a great match with Chris Benoit on an Owen Hart tribute match.
Yeah. And it was probably the best match that Benoit had at that point. One of the best matches of Bret's career.
What happened to Owen was awful.
Yeah.
Awful. And that's got to be hard on Bret, man. The company that fired him, his brother happens to die there. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah.
That's awful.
And that kind of kills his love of wrestling for a little bit. He comes back basically just to work because it's a job. And he joins this new version of the NWO, gets another world title reign, and then he gets kicked in the head. by Bill Goldberg and is never the same.
Works a few more matches after that.
Yeah, against Bill Goldberg.
He shouldn't have worked any matches after.
No, he made the choice to
I
continue
know.
wrestling, and I think that's where those extra concussions and the bicycle wreck is what took
the
Bret
bike
Hart.
crash was big. Yeah.
But from there, we get into the final chapter of Bret Hart.
Post Goldberg, aftermath OD.
Yeah, we
Thank you,
get
No
into
Handshakes, for that cool name there. Shout out to you guys.
our good friends, No Handshakes. We'd love to. Hopefully, we'll get to see Denver Dave Denver sometime soon.
We miss you, Dave Denver.
But we have WWA is the first time that we really see Bret pop up of any prominence after WCW closes.
What is he, the commissioner or something?
Do what?
Is he like I think he was the commissioner?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he walked out with their awful belt and claimed it was important. Yeah, so Bret was the commissioner of World Wrestling All-Stars, a Australian company ran by James McManus, I believe. I know it was McManus.
I believe so. Yeah, it's something McManus for sure.
Yeah, that was where Nathan Jones first started getting any relevancy. To give you a perspective, the Road Dogg was one of their early world champions. Grandmaster
Brian
Sensei,
Christopher. Yep.
Yeah, was a main event wrestler.
Yep.
They were going to have Randy Savage, but they couldn't agree on money.
Poor Savage.
They advertised him anyways.
WWA was an interesting idea, but it was basically the crumblings of what was left of WCW that didn't go to WWE.
In a rich Australian's hands.
With the exception of like young up-and-comers, like I think AJ was there for a minute.
If
I'm not mistaken, Elix Skipper was there.
Well, and I mean, they had Jerry Lynn and Eddie Guerrero for a light heavyweight title. Like,
excellent. And
they had good matches.
Conan was there. Like, there were some great workers over
But at the same time, they also had the Bananas in Pajamas and Disco Inferno. Yeah. So it was pretty bad.
You mean gifted Glenn Gilberti?
Huh?
You mean gifted Glenn Gilberti? That's what they say.
In my opinion, he's gifted. I actually was a big disco fan when I was a kid. Like, I was very disappointed when I went to my first Monday Night Nitro. Here's a story that you've never heard me say. My first Monday Night Nitro, I was very disappointed when there wasn't a giant disco ball that came down for Disco Inferno's entrance. Because I thought there was, the way that it looked on TV. I was like, oh my God, they lowered a disco ball for him. And I was like, Disco Fever! And there is no giant disco ball. It was heartbreaking.
You were upset.
I was.
That's awful, man. I'm sorry you didn't get to see Disco's balls. So in the aftermath, OD.
The
WWA. The WWA didn't last long, as we all know. All right, and the remnants of that.
That Bret never showed up in TNA.
I feel, and I've never read this, but you know, because you read a lot of stories, especially since Jeff Jarrett started the My World podcast. Check that out if you haven't seen it. That's a plug for you, Jeff.
My World.
And I'm sure they talked.
I would imagine that it's been a money thing.
I'm sure they talked. Yeah,
because they threw the bag at Sting because that was he was the biggest name that could still work. Bret couldn't work. So it would have really just been appearance.
It's like I know that when Angle came into TNA a little bit later, that they tried to work out a deal with Lesnar, and Lesnar wanted them to match Angle's pay, and they couldn't do it, so Lesnar wouldn't come in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that could have been Bret wanted what Sting was getting, and that wouldn't have been worth it.
Right.
Bret
Not at that time.
Work. Yeah, he couldn't work anymore. But Bret does end up working a little bit more in the WWE.
Well, before that, he gets inducted in the Hall of Fame in 2006. He makes his first appearance during that since the Screwjob. That would have been 9 years post Montreal Screwjob.
Yeah. And if you see, if you're watching this and you look over Tanner's left shoulder, you'll see Bret's greatest match, his WrestleMania 12 match.
100%. Great.
against Shawn.
So, and then in 2009, at the end of 2009, there's a lot of speculation. Vince McMahon comes out to the ring and he announces the special guest host of WrestleMania is Bret the Hitman Hart. So,
And we get Bret with his nephew-in-law.
was he with the Hart Dynasty at this point?
I think so, for a little bit.
So he was with his niece and nephew.
And nephew-in-law.
And nephew-in-law.
Sure, we'll call it.
Of sorts.
Yeah.
The remnants of what was left besides Teddy Hart, who...
Yeah.
Teddy, you were great, but you couldn't hold it together, buddy.
He was fun to watch in the ring, but he was cancer
Not so fun backstage. Yeah.
But yeah, from there Bret really doesn't do much. He wins that U.S. title in a cluster.
He and Shawn Michaels make up.
Yeah, they make up.
They do the big handshake thing. He and Vince have the no holds barred match at WrestleMania 26. It's awful. Awful. Bret beats
Don't
The
go
Miz.
back and watch that one.
Bret beats The Miz for the U.S. title for some reason, and then like maybe a week later, he vacated it and became the GM of Raw. But he actually worked house shows through the rest of that year before he actually finally retired in 2011.
And that's from there. He made sporadic appearances. He showed up in AEW.
Yep.
With their world title.
He was tackled at Hall of Fame.
Yeah, by a crazed fan. Mm-hmm. That went viral for a little bit.
He actually also made an appearance for TNA finally on the Videotron when he congratulated Ken Shamrock for his Impact Hall of Fame induction.
Yeah.
It counts because The Rock did too.
Oh, The Rock showed up at TNA then, technically. Is that what you're telling me?
That's right.
So, we don't know what the final chapter of Bret's life career will be. He may pop up somewhere as a commissioner tomorrow, for all we know.
I think it's unlikely, but not out of the realm of possibility.
I wouldn't put it out of there. I could see Scott D'Amore talking to him and being like, "You want to work over here with me for a little bit?"
I could totally see Bret working for Maple Leaf Pro.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
But if you could pick Bret Hart in his prime to go against any worker today, who would you pick?
Today?
I
was hoping you were going to give me another option because I was totally going to say prime Kurt Angle. But definitely, if I had to pick someone,
anybody, Bret in his prime against anybody in their prime first. And
I'll give you Kurt at 100% undisputed. Kurt. If it had to be somebody from today, who would give Bret the best possible match? I think that it would be fun to see Bret take on a guy like Claudio Castagnoli. I think it would be fun to see Bret take on a guy like Kenny Omega, Kazuchika Okada,
Josh Alexander.
Josh Alexander is probably an even better pick. Zack Sabre
Josh
Jr.
Alexander would probably be my pick.
Zack Sabre Jr. would be a great option.
If Nigel wanted to lace up those boots, that would be a lot of fun.
That would be the pick.
Actually, I want to see him and Hangman. I feel like that could be a fun technical match.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that I think that Bret could just tear it up with today. It would be hard for me.
Bret in his prime could have made me and you look like decent workers.
100%. And I wouldn't be upset to see Bret versus Punk. Like, I think in their primes, they could have done some great work together.
I feel like Punk would have, poked his own eyes out to have had that opportunity.
Yeah.
To work with Bret one time.
In tag team action, I would love to see Jim Neidhart and Bret Hart go up against FTR.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. Yeah, the Briscoes, absolutely. Yeah. Even a team like the Usos.
Well, Bret, let's be honest. Bret is, in technical working, Bret is one of the greatest of all time.
I
was
could
in
have
our
said
tournament
Marco
last year.
Stunt, and we would have been on here next week talking about that match.
Yeah.
If that happened.
Yeah, like Bret. Well, look at Bret and the 1, 2, 3 kid at the time. Like
Hey,
nobody knew who
1-2-3
he
Kid was great, though.
but nobody knew who he was at the time. He
Yeah.
was
That's
a
true.
nobody little kid, really.
Little
But
Sean
everybody
Waltman.
loved that match.
I'll tell you another good one, real quick for all time, would be Bret versus Rob Van Dam in his prime.
I have never had any desire, but I'm going to say Bret and Eddie Guerrero.
What about Bret and Chris Jericho?
Yeah, it would have been great. What do you consider Chris Jericho's prime?
That's relative because Chris Jericho's prime, he's kind of had a couple primes. To me, it's really hard not to say the cruiserweight man of 1004 holds era, where he first comes in and is the millennium. But it's also really hard not to say his prime was when he cut his hair and started wearing a suit and was world champion.
I liked the list more.
The list is great, but I felt like that was a little late in the game to call it his prime. That was definitely a new prime.
I do feel like probably 2000 and 2001 is Jericho's prime.
Okay.
Like,
you could make an argument for 08. You could make an argument for 03. You could make an argument for really any year.
I mean, you could make an argument for 2019, really.
Yeah, you could.
It was a great year. But that's Chris Jericho. This is Bret Hart. Bret had those same kind of years. 1992, 1994, 1995, 1996. Bret was just as good as Shawn Michaels. Yeah, I didn't shut my door, and you see what I've got going on behind me?
I see that. This is the man right here, guys. A true Canadian and Tanadian hero right here.
Are there any matches you recommend fans go check out of Bret?
So you already mentioned it, and I touched on it earlier as well, but definitely Benoit versus Bret, WCW. If you check nothing else out from his WCW run, at least watch that match. WrestleMania 12, always, 60-minute Iron Man match with Steve Austin.
Not with Shawn Michaels.
With Shawn Michaels, I'm sorry.
Yeah. WrestleMania 13, I Quit match with Steve Austin.
Yeah, that one. Either one of those, great stuff.
Yeah, Bret, I would argue that Bret had more consistency from 1992 through 1998 than anybody else.
Check out Perfect versus Bret at SummerSlam 91.
Yeah. Yeah, Bret. Well, there's a reason that me and you were like, I would be perfectly fine with Bret Hart winning our GOAT contest.
Yeah.
The only thing that Bret really lacked in was mic skills.
And during the heel era in the late 90s, I really enjoyed his mic work for probably the only time in his career because he was just running everybody down.
I feel like he was just getting it off of his chest at that point.
He was just venting at that point into the microphone.
He was over it.
Yeah.
But any final thoughts for our fans?
Guys, we are separate, but we are still doing this for you. Very soon, we have worked out a deal to fix this situation so you can see our ugly mugs together once again.
Yeah. We'll be back to our together shenanigans here in a few weeks. Next week, I think I'm going to try and work out something with our friend Denver Dave and see if we can't maybe get some no handshakes on till 5.
Yeah, that would be big, man.
Who says we can only be the Forbidden Pod once every 5 episodes? We do what we want.
There is no rules.
Yeah, we're in charge here.
We are the ones who knock.
That's till 5, folks. We'll see you next week.
Top Pod out.